Welcome back. After losing the race for governor in one of the closest races in the state's history, Andrew Gillum is back in the public eye, announcing he would mount a major voter registration effort to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. He stopped by the studio earlier this week to discuss that effort, why he decided not to run for president, the Democratic field in general, and Beto O'Rourke in particular. Here's part of that interview.
After you lose a race so close, 32,000 votes out of 8.2 or so million votes cast in the race for governor, you start to assess all kinds of things. What could you have done differently? What could what went wrong that you wish had gone, a different way? And the truth is in an election that close, 0.4% separating you, it's never one thing. It's any number of things. It's everything. But there are some things that I have to tell you I think are structural with regards to Democrats' inability to win in this state. And I think one of the contributors to the issue is the fact that when Barack Obama was on the ballot, Democrats had a registration advantage of nearly 100,000 more registered voters than Republicans. When I was on the ballot this November, that advantage has shrunk to around 250,000, and it continues to tighten. And the truth is I recognize that everybody who's registered to vote doesn't necessarily vote, but it certainly helps to have more marbles on the table. That way, if some of them roll off, it doesn't cost you the election. And in a state that is a 1% state, it's critical that we get back to the basics of re-engaging voters. So today we're announcing that we, along with our partnership, are going to commit to registering and re-engaging 1 million voters in this state in advance of the presidential election, so that we flip Florida blue in the presidential race and put us on a pathway to winning in future elections in this state.
Some people thought that you were going to announce a candidacy for president. It seems like there's a pretty large field. Why aren't you running for president?
Well, I tell you, I'm taking care of home. I think the best role that I can play at this time, having come off of a 2-year grueling race here in one of the swingiest swing states out there in the country, is doing everything that I can to prepare the state of Florida to go blue. I've learned a lot. I came within 32,000 votes of getting elected out of over 8 million votes cast. We had over 70,000 volunteers taking action on behalf of our campaign, over 1 million conversations we opened in two-way text message exchanges with people in the state. We want to turn that apparatus, those resources, into good, not for a single election cycle, but enduring by helping to build a more progressive base of voters here in Florida.
After the 2018 election, there was immediately, it seemed like a gravitational pull towards, there were 3 candidates, yourself, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and Beto O'Rourke in Texas. Yet all the focus seemed to immediately shift to Beto O'Rourke and whether or not he would run for president. Is there an element of white privilege that's at play here, in which I didn't hear a lot of discussions, with the same sort of fervor about you, about Stacey, as we immediately heard about Beto?
Yeah, well, I would tell you, I know Stacey very well. We were friends.
And she may still get in the race.
Yeah, I mean,
but you get my point.
Her consideration.
But you get my point.
I do.
Is there an element of either benign or subtle racism at play here, or white privilege?
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us can dishonor privilege in this, but the point is that I'm not interested in pursuing that track. It appears that Beto is, as he's now entered this race. I'm used to working, and post my race, I think the best work I can do is by coming back and making Florida ready for whoever the Democratic nominee is for president. We can't wait for that person to be decided before we get to work. We got to get to work now if we plan on winning this state.
Can Democrats win Florida, or even the larger field across the United States, if it nominates 2 white men to run for president and vice president?
Well, I tell you, I think whoever makes it through the process, because this is the pressing that is about to go on between the candidates, I believe will be the right candidate to move us forward. It is my hope that candidate, if it were a white male, or frankly, whomever the candidate is, we would be looking for a ticket that represents the fierce diversity of our party and also the diversity of this country. I think it is a hallmark right now within the Democratic Party that we believe in representative government and representative government, but also representational, which means that we got to reflect the diversity of this country. And if we do that, I think we win.
So I go back to the question, can 2 white men on the ticket win the Democratic nomination and win a general election?
Well, first of all white men aren't created equal. They all, there's not a monolith. Everybody brings a different set of experiences to the table. And I think we got to evaluate people based off of what they bring to the table. I'm not one to disqualify a ticket over something like race alone. I think it's got to be a combination of factors. But I do believe that whoever the Democratic nominee is will look for a diverse, qualified ticket, and most importantly, a vice president who is prepared to assume the office of presidency.
When you look at the field, give me your assessment of the Democratic field.
I like them. That's not a cop-out. I do. I know a lot of them, to be quite frank.
Explain Beto to me then, because I'm still trying to understand.
Yeah.
I'm not from Texas, so
Sure.
he's a phenomenon there. Explain Beto to me.
Well, Beto is one that I know less. I've only talked to Beto one time, and it was over the phone. But I did what I could watch of his race. He looks to have inspired a great number of people in the state of Texas and beyond, frankly. And I think that led to a lot of the demand for him to enter the race for president of the United States. He's obviously spent some time in Congress, which I think can serve him well. But he's got to get out there and help to describe to the people of this country who he is, what he stands for. I can tell you, I'm not going to be a voter who is going to fall behind a cult of personality. I want to know what you're going to do. I want to know what your big ideas are. I want to know what your vision is. I want to know where your moral and your political compass is. And I think he's still early in this, and so there's a lot of time for him to suss that out. But I will tell you, I don't think that any of us are just going to go behind a shiny object. I'm not referring to him.
I was going to try to get you in trouble.
Yeah. But I do want to make sure that we know that I think Democrats want to make sure that they are right with the issues of the candidate they choose.
So I want to go back to the governor's race for a second. On Friday, you were on Bill Maher's show, and one of the things you said, this is a quote from you, had we been able to legally count every one of those votes, not just in Florida, but in Georgia, I wonder what the outcome may be, you said.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, very simply, the conversation was around voter disengagement and disenfranchisement. And we know, both in Georgia and in Florida, that we have laws that are consequential to who gets access to the ballot box and who doesn't. Take, for instance, the tens of thousands of votes that were rejected over signature mismatch. A study from the University of Florida showed that of those ballots that are rejected over signature mismatch, 7 out of 10 of them are from voters of color. Let's compare the fact that you have voters in some precincts where they show up and there are several more hundreds of voters in those precincts than in communities of color and in disenfranchised communities, yet the waits happen to be longer there. Let's take, in all sincerity, the fact that we had to go to court to get polling places on college campuses here in the state, or the fact that a license for hunting is acceptable, yet one for student ID isn't. So what I'm saying is that there are structural barriers that keep people from being able to equitably access the ballot box. And my reference was, quite frankly, to not just Florida and Georgia, but North Carolina, a number of states around the country. I want to be clear that I wasn't making the case to delegitimize the election that took place here. But the broader point around voter integrity, election integrity, and disenfranchisement, which is an issue we must see to. And by the way, you don't have to look any further than what's happening on this reenfranchisement legislation in Tallahassee to see what I mean, that their actions could potentially disenfranchise 97% of those folks who might be eligible for getting back on the voter rolls.
Now, you can watch the full interview with Andrew Gillum on our website at cbsmiami.com. We'll be right back after the break.